Welcome to episode 2 of Marathon Talk, powered by Abbott World Marathon Majors. On this week's show, we'll be talking about that fast women's race in Chicago, the latest 6-star finisher stats, including a new oldest female 6-star, looking ahead to the finale of the Abbott World Marathon Majors Series 14 in New York City, and we'll be talking to Susannah Scaroni.
Martin, how are you?
I'm all right, Deena. I've definitely probably had a quieter few weeks than you, though. Last time, before we started recording, you said, you know what? It's nice to be home.
So true. But I thought I had the weekend off, and I opened my phone Sunday morning to see that blazing performance in Amsterdam by Alma Zayana, a course record, a debut record in 2:17. This is where we are. We're in marathon season. It is just nuts that every weekend gives us a mind-blowing experience.
It's pretty busy at the moment, isn't it? It is pretty busy. Your legs are all right after Berlin and all your traveling around? All good?
Yeah, I think, we go to these races, you sit there on the stage and inspire everybody. And I'm, whether I'm doing commentary or just there as a race ambassador or running, we're meant to inspire people. And every time I get on that airplane to go to the next place, or this time come home, I am just so inspired by everything that I see on the roads, from the first finisher to that last finisher coming down the straightaway to cross that finish line. There are so many amazing stories, which is why I love what we're doing right now, to be able to share some of those great takeaways.
We spoke a little bit on the show last time about your trip to Chicago, and you were doing the 5K before. How did that feel?
It was great. I ran with two agents, my agent Ray Flynn and Brendan Riley out of Boulder, Colorado. So we had a great time. It was wonderful. Joan was actually Joan Benoit Samuelson holding the finish line tape for the winners very far in front of us. So she didn't run with us this year, but there were more Olympians in the 5K than in the actual Chicago Marathon itself.
Wow.
So come out to that 5K, everybody.
Yeah, I don't think I could make the 26.2 miles, but the 5K sounds brilliant. Anyway, right, moving on with the show. It is, as Deena has already said, it is busy season in busy town right now. It's 3 consecutive weekends of majors. That's Berlin, London and Chicago. It's the last time that will ever happen, we hope and think, with London moving back to April in the spring of 2023. We saw one world record, the second fastest time in history in a women's marathon, 4 course records, the women's in Berlin, both wheelchair records in London, Marcel breaking the course record in Chicago as well, a new American women's record, and we breached 8,000 barrier for 6-star finishers by the time we left Chicago. What a busy few weeks.
It has been so exciting. And 472 6-star finishers across the 3 races. That is a lot of medal giving. If you look at that heavy hardware, someone's suitcase was a lot lighter in the Abbott world coming home from those races to be able to unleash and unload all of those medals. What great accomplishments.
I love the concept of heavy hardware.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Heavy hardware.
Who had to travel with those in their duffel bag? I want to know which employee it was that had to do that.
Fantastic. Your hand luggage allowance has just gone through the roof because you've got a 6-star finishers medal in. Right, let's carry on with the show.
We're going to talk everything Chicago right now. And I'm going to have to begin with the women's race because Ruth Chepng'etich ran the race of her life. She was only 14 seconds off of Bridget Koskai's world record. But the way she ran it, she was ahead of most of the men for that race, under 2 hours, 10 minutes for the good first 15K of that race, she ended up slowing. She raced exactly like that last year, went out blazing fast, and she faded, but she didn't really die. And she did the same thing this time. I think actually, Martin, if she ran a little smarter, she would have gotten that record if she didn't go out so aggressively. Maybe went with the men's pack that was a little further back and had some people to run with. She was running with one pacer, but what an amazing race. Her first half was 65:44 and Koskai's was 66:59. So it was a big discrepancy there. She finally slowed after 30K and fell off world record pace, but she ran solo that entire race. And it was just, I'm going to say it was brilliant. A lot of people said she didn't run very smart. I think it was a brilliant race because one of these days she's going to get out there and she's going to hang on and blow the doors off that world record.
Well, 2:14:18. So, here we are saying, well, was it a bit of a crazy race? She ran 2:14:18 to run the second fastest time in women's marathoning history. And Deena, she went through half in 65:44. Just as a standalone half marathon time, that is absolutely outstanding in women's world-class half marathon racing. She's 75 seconds ahead of Bridget Kosgei at that point in the race and of world record time, going through 10K and 15K in 2:09 pace. You were watching that. And what was going through your mind when you saw her running 2:09? And what do you think was going through the minds of her competitors hundreds of meters back?
Right. Well, nobody could see her. So they might have assumed she just sprinted down the road and then went to a coffee shop or something. But it was the fastest 10K in any marathon, the fastest 10K split, her first 10K. And at 10 miles, she ran a world's best in within the marathon. So some people go and they run 10-mile races and the world's best time was broken within this marathon. So it was just a stunning performance. And you alluded to her first half marathon at 65:44. Emily Sisson, we have to give kudos to her for breaking the American record here. It was only months old, Kira D'Amato's record from January at the Houston Marathon. She has the American record in the half marathon at 67:11. So Ruth Chepng'etich ran faster than Emily Sisson's half marathon record. But another brilliant race by Emily Sisson. She ran it very differently. Emily's race was perfectly consistent. Every 5K looked like the last. She picked it up the last kilometer. She came in looking like a 1,500 meter runner when she came down that finishing stretch to cross the finish line. But a beautifully paced race by Emily Sisson to now have the American record in the half marathon and the marathon. And she has been on the scene for a long time. She was a 2-time NCAA champion from Providence, an indoor NCAA record holder at 5,000 meters. She's run 15:12:22 indoors. But I don't know if anybody saw the U.S. Olympic trials last year. She won the Olympic trials 10,000 meters in a Olympic trials record. She broke my Olympic trials record in the 10,000 meters. She did it in hot conditions. It was like 84 degrees on the track. And then made her first Olympic team doing that. Her debut was in 2019 in London, where she set a debut record. So we could see from Emily Sisson that she was ready to do something great in the marathon. She took a few years off to hone in on her speed. She was afraid to step away from the track too much, but she's coached by Ray Tracy from college to now. So he knows her so well and has just developed her so beautifully into a marathon runner.
69:26 first half, 69:03. So you're right, a very different race to the one that Chepng'etich was having right at the front. She came in second place in 2:18:29. That's the second time your record has been broken by an American woman this year. So a really interesting thought around her progress now. Running 2:18. Fastest debut in 2019. So actually, relatively speaking, although she's been running a long time and has moved in a traditional way up through the distances to reach marathon and then almost find her distance and find her strength and to deliver that 2:18. Like, what do you think's next?
Well, I think that she has a chance of medaling in the Olympic Games. And it's mind-blowing to me to even try to figure out who's going to be on the U.S. Olympic team, let alone anybody else's Olympic team. I feel like I know these women because I've studied what they've been doing the past few years, but it's going to be a hard team to make. They're going to have to be in peak shape in order to make that US team. So, but this is it. Whether it's national records or world records or course records, this is what our lives have come to every single weekend. My heart can't take it anymore.
It's not just the women's. There's some brilliant running in the men's. Benson Kipruto ran a PB, tactically got it right, really pushed in the last 5K, very similar to when he won Boston in 2021, putting in a really strong late surge after a tactical race. And you said you were quite connected by one of his comments around a victory the previous week.
Yeah, his teammate Amos Kipruto is a training partner of his, and he was really inspired by his win in London, and it gave him belief that he could also win in Chicago. So I love that these performances don't sit in a silo by themselves. They're inspiring teammates. They're inspiring countrymen and countrywomen. And so the marathon has legs. Let's just say it. Is that so cheesy to say? The marathon has legs.
There's a bit of a Kipruto bromance going on.
Yes. I just love that these performances are so inspiring. And then you go on to the wheelchair athletes, and Marcel Hug has just dominated the fall races, course records. He's just brilliant to watch race. He's so tactical. I saw he won Berlin, he won London, he won Chicago. And so he's pretty much a shoo-in for getting that Series 14 title after New York. I don't even think he needs to push in New York in order to win that title. But he shows up to all these races, and it's so impressive to see them week in and week out, not just these demanding performances, but the travel that takes place in between. A lot of people did that. And Susannah Scaroni has some great tips on how to recover from one race before you rev up for another one in my conversation with her. Her first Abbott World Marathon major title in Chicago. She ran a beautiful race after getting third in Berlin, second in London. She was able to win in Chicago. And my interview with her in this episode was so inspiring. I was fired up after talking to her.
I can't wait to. I haven't listened to it. We were chatting at the beginning of the show. We were talking about how we had a little bit of time with Susannah just before the recording started, and I was itching because Deena was. You were getting to speak to her, and I knew what was coming would be a great interview. So I've saved it, and I actually haven't listened. So I'm going to listen to it later on in the show. I'm excited to hearing a story of Chicago, and look, there's so many. This autumn we've seen Berlin, London, now Chicago, and we're about to see New York. And in every single of these events, we see some staggering stories. And one that stood out for me in Chicago was Gina Little. And I didn't know that Gina Little lives in Greenwich in London, where I was just a couple of weeks ago. She ran her first London in 1983. She's run the London Marathon 38 times. And in running Chicago at the weekend, she earned her Abbott World Marathon Majors 6-star finishers medal at age 77, having run 602 marathons.
Is that mind-blowing? I also was blown away by her story. She traveled to Berlin and to London and Chicago to get her 6-star finishers medal. She has run London more than any other British woman. This lady is fantastic. She does yoga. She runs marathons. She is vibrant. You would never guess. I mean, I feel like how many people ask you, oh, how are your knees? I feel like that's something. She looks like she could just run circles around anybody. Yeah. She looks like light on her feet and happy with every step. She is a poster child for what marathons should be for people.
I want Gina Little's knees.
Yeah.
So she ran 4:37 in Chicago to get a third place in the 75 to 79 age group. Yeah, and in doing so, and her Abbott World Marathon Major 6-star. What a result, age 77. It's just brilliant. I wonder what comes next when you've run 602 marathons. There's a group of marathoners that have run every London called the Ever-Presents. And of course, she must have missed a few, but she's the woman that has done the most. I think there's about 8 Ever-Presents that have done all 42. They're all men. So yeah, it was a fab story hearing about Gina.
That's also amazing to me. These runners who have done every edition of every race in the history of some of these events, because life gets in the way. I tried for 3 years to run the Berlin Marathon. Like, things happen. And so it's so impressive that regardless of birthdays or weddings or injuries, whatever it is, that these people find the time to put in the work and show up on race day and get to that finish line.
Well, look at the span. You know, I know we joked with you, the span it took you in years to get your Abbott World Marathon Major 6-star finish. Was it like 21 years or something? Was it that long?
Yeah, Martin, it was that long.
It was that long. Well, Gina has doubled you almost. You know, her first London in 1983, but going all the way, I guess. It took her 12 years, but her first London was 83, and her Chicago this year was 2022. I mean, she has been running amazingly for 40 years. Awesome. If you fancy Chicago 2023, next year is the Abbott World Marathon Major Wonder Age Group World Championships. There you go. This year it was in London, and next year it's in Chicago.
A great celebration following those world championships. So it's an exciting time. Glad that it's in Chicago so I can be there to celebrate.
We did last time on the show, we mentioned just briefly this new era, and you mentioned it in the intro. New era for women's marathoning. We saw a 2:17 in Amsterdam at the weekend. We saw a 2:14 in Chicago. You know, we saw amazing performances in Berlin, amazing performances in London, US record being broken twice in 10 months, and it had stood for 20 years. It really is an exciting setup for New York, but also for the spring of 2023.
Right. I mean, every weekend, it's the third fastest of all time, second fastest of all time, American record, course record. We have New York to go. And the lineup there, Sam Grotwald, the elite athlete coordinator, has again put together a field that is just astonishing in what collectively these athletes have accomplished. So we are in a new era. And on the men's side, it's taking 2:05 or under to win one of these marathons. And so in the day and age where I was growing up in this sport, it was if you broke 2:20 as a woman or you broke 2:10 as a man. And now, you know, we're on the brink of breaking 2 hours in the marathon in order to win a big marathon race. So it's extraordinary times. And I actually thought that they were dwindling down. We are maybe going to see a little leveling off here. But then you see Eliud Kipchoge running his 2:01:09 in Berlin, and you see Ruth Chepng'etich going out in under 2 hours, 10 pace. She would eventually fade to 2:14:18. But this is where we are, aggressive racing. And I want to say that the first person I ever saw race a marathon aggressively was Paula Radcliffe. I thought she runs on her toes. She's aggressive. There's no way she's going to be good at this event. Well, she proved me wrong her first day out, but she's that style of racing in the marathon. It's similar to the time where the 800 went from an 800 meter run to an 800 meter dash. We might be the marathon sprint. We might have to start calling it that from the way that athletes are getting out there and racing.
Yeah. And the application of human endurance for, 2 hours. It's just incredible. Yeah, excited to see. We're going to talk a little bit about New York City coming up later on in this show. Runner Alexandra Williams has been busy chasing her Abbott World Marathon Major's 6-star finish. She joins us now for the second part of her audio blog.
Hi, I'm Alexandra Williams. I am 4 stars along in my 6-star journey. I live here in the DC, Maryland area in the United States of America. So a quick recap, I ended up receiving 2 of my stars recently in doing Berlin and London just a few weeks ago, and then decided to go right on over to cheer at Chicago Marathon. So technically, I've been to 3 world majors within 3 weeks. It was one experience I will always cherish and remember. I've had some time to recover, I think, and also slept so much. But I will say that this journey of not just running the majors, but being at the majors really showed me what I would call the circle of being a runner. Berlin for me, just as a quick recap, was all about speed and focus and racing. For many people, it is a flat course. They go into it with saying that they had the best PR that they've had. The weather's great. It's one of the first world majors for the fall to kick off every year in September. And so my mindset for Berlin was to get an amazing PR and to take a week of recovery. Of course, that did not happen. Instead, what led me in Berlin was to actually face a huge fear that I spoke about on the previous episode of not meeting the time limit. And that's not something that most people talk about in facing your fears, but living it and having to say that this fear is okay. And it's okay to talk about it, but to go through the process of accepting it, of being honest with myself, and then finally letting it go. I was given such an amazing experience in this quote unquote failure of seeing people who truly loved me, who loved on me, who had gone through the same situation. Some people actually did not even finish the course. Other ones, they barely made it, and it was one of their worst races. Some people shared about their failures in Ironman. One person in particular, who is like my run sister, Erica, she gave me so much recovery advice, mental advice, and loved on me every single day while she was preparing for one of her races clearly across the states. I am just so amazed at how many people showed up in that moment for me. When I was ready to quit, I didn't even want to go to London. I was ready. I was 2 seconds away from changing my flights, going back home. It was a lot. But what it allowed was the next phase of what I would call running, and it happened in London, is this mantra that I have in just enjoying the journey. That's what London taught me and reminded me the importance of enjoying this journey in running. I had a blast. I don't know if it was the English tea that I had every day, roaming around on the buses and trains and the tube, being able to practice my British slang. I don't know what it was, but I definitely will say it was the love of England, the people around me, my friends that were there, some new friends I met and connected with. And I honestly extended my stay in London almost a full day later because I was out late. I had a lot of fun and I just didn't want to leave. That's truly what London taught me, to really enjoy it. And I look at my pictures and it's night and day from Berlin. I'm smiling, like grinning on every single one of my London pictures as if I own the place. And I'm just so happy to be there. I brought that same love and lesson back with me, slept a little bit, and then went to what I'll call the third aspect in being a runner, which is to be supportive and encouraging and celebrating towards others. I don't know anybody else that goes through what we go through every single day to train. But then on the flip side, we are always, as runners, supporting other people. During a race, we're helping people. We stop and hug our loved ones. We do so much as runners. And so Chicago was a great reminder how important it is just to support other people outside of being a runner. I know it was a great feat to come back from overseas, to then stop, say hi to my hedgehog. Yes, I have a pet hedgehog, Her name is Boston. She was very upset that I left for 2 weeks, and she was really sort of excited to see me back. But then I left her again for a couple of days. And I enjoyed myself in Chicago. I led a shakeout run for the first time. I got to see people I hadn't seen for almost a year. Some of them I saw in Boston and ran with them. And so a big thing that happened in Chicago was how many people looked at my wrist and saw that I still had on my Berlin race bracelet. And they said, "Oh, you're wearing a London shirt and you have a Berlin race bracelet. Did you just do both of them?" And everyone was so amazed that not only was I sane, my face was clear, I was smiling and running around, but I just finished 2 world majors and was there in Chicago just to support people. That to me, I felt like some superstar, a rock star, but it was like, I'm here to support and encourage other people. And they were supporting and encouraging me of what I just did. It was everywhere the entire weekend. So it meant so much more on race day when I woke up and was tracking. I think I had 30 people that I was tracking and looking for. I started at the first 3K that Sunday. And of course, the excitement is there. There's thousands of people and I could hardly see anybody. I was there and in formation at the water station, I saw a few people I knew, took pictures with them, but an amazing thing happened at the race in that moment. I kept missing a lot of people and was so frustrated. And there was a photographer right next to me and he was taking pictures of a group called Chai Run. And I kept seeing the runners. So I would tap him and say, "Hey, there's one of your runners." And so it ended up being that because I didn't see my friends that I was tracking, I always found his. Right towards the end, when I was finding the last person that I was tracking and I was about to give up, they come through. He's like my running uncle and I'm screaming. He gives me this big hug. And both the photographer and station aide one captain, one took my phone and the other photographer, he took pictures of this moment. And I forgot all about it until I received this email and a text message of the photographer who connected with the police officer and the captain to find me, to send me those photos he took of me. I mean, I don't know how this happened, but it was just an amazing moment, kind of creepy, but an amazing moment that he saw that moment. The pictures were so loving and so rich. And you just saw the love of 2 people who genuinely care. And we're just, just an amazing moment of cheering together. I'm just forever grateful that that's what it is to not just be a runner, but be on the other side and supporting each other. So after that, I bolted off, went to the halfway mark, and that's where I was able to find most of my friends. I had a great time. I think they found me because of my sweatshirt was pretty loud. I was able to pinpoint me in this bright yellow sweatshirt I had on, getting lots of hugs. I also got a chance to see my run sister, Erica, that was helping me virtually just a couple of weeks ago in Berlin. It was, I think, her 11th, or I've forgotten how many Chicago marathons she's done. That's her race that she does every year. Surprised her, a huge hug. She always gives me a kiss before any race on the cheek. And that moment, once again, meant so much. Also, she is a 6-star finisher and finished last year in Boston. So it was great to see her in her World Abbott gear, celebrating herself again and her love again on me for my own journey. So that's kind of the cycle of what it is to be a runner. I think we all go through that where we're racing. And if we're done with racing, we're just enjoying it. And then we kind of go back and forth with being just supportive and celebrating. And I'm happy that I had those in 3 weeks. My bank account is not, but I'm happy that I experienced that and was reminded of how important it is to be a runner, but not just any runner, a runner that's on this journey of 6 stars. I could have chosen any marathon, but to be at Berlin, London, Chicago, and now coming up New York, Tokyo, and again, Boston. These are world majors that people from all over the world are looking at, would hope to be at, or just are there to cheer and experience a fraction of what we as runners get to experience maybe once, twice, 3 or 4 times, depending on how many times you do the world majors. So I'm just really happy, excited to head out to New York, where once again, I'll be just a cheer squad person, but I'll be connecting a lot more with different run groups and organizations there, which looks a little bit different than what I was doing in Chicago. And of course, my training is taken up and up with my amazing coach, Amanda, and working with a Boston charity team to help fundraise. So I have a packed fall and winter ahead of me, but I know no matter what, I'm enjoying the journey.
Earlier on in the show, Deena, you got really excited about Susannah Scaroni's interview. I'm excited about it too, so here it is.
It is a great privilege that my first interview co-hosting for Marathon Talk is with a favorite athlete of mine. Susannah Scaroni is a Paralympic gold medalist, world record holder in the 5 and 10,000 meters, American record holder in the marathon, and newly crowned Bank of America Chicago Marathon champion. Susannah, welcome to Marathon Talk.
Thank you so much, Deena. It is so fun to be here. And I have to admit, you are my favorite marathoner as well, ever since you waved at me in the 2013 LA Marathon when I called out your name, and I was just like, she noticed me.
I'm actually drinking out of a LA Marathon mug with you in mind. I have been a fan ever since, but what a completely dominant race you pushed in Chicago. It was so breathtaking to watch just how strong you have become in this sport. And I mean, you've accomplished so much, but was your first Abbott World Marathon major win as sweet as you imagined it to be, or was there some surprise emotion there?
It was very sweet. I have to be perfectly honest, there was a little bit of a caveat in my perspective that, one of my greatest competitors, Manuela Schar, unfortunately got sick between Berlin and London Marathon and was unable to be there that day. And while I 100% gave everything I had that day, I still hold in my heart, a wonder, I feel like it's so hard to know if you really deserve the win when you don't have, the people who are right there with you. But it was still extremely sweet nonetheless. I tried so hard to maintain the fastest pace I could go over the distance. And so I'm so satisfied that I gave everything I had to Chicago that day. And the sweet part about it, in addition, obviously, to coming in first, was that we had unparalleled coverage more than ever before. And I got to be such a great part of that. So many people got to see wheelchair racing, and that was what was very sweet to me that day.
It was indeed incredible. And you've actually been at this sport to see it gain the attention it so deserves. I think it was 1975 that the wheelchair division was incorporated into the Boston Marathon. It took years later before all the world marathon majors incorporated a wheelchair division that actually was professionalized and made money. And here we are with Amanda McGrory, part of the television broadcast, Paralympic gold medalist. She's won London and Boston and Chicago herself, to be so great giving behind the scenes coverage of what it takes. And I feel like one of my favorite things in listening to that broadcast that day was hearing the story of your racing chair. So no one's going to tell it better than you or Amanda. So could you tell us about your racing chair?
Yes. So my whole year has just been kind of a wild, crazy whirlwind that I have to think about all these kind of crazy things that have happened point by point. But my racing chair is no small, miraculous accident within that. And so what happened about a year ago, September, I was hit by a car while I was racing, or while I was training. And, because of that kind of accident, I did not have a racing chair. And so what I had sort of planned to do in November because I wasn't allowed to start trying to race again until January. So I started thinking positively that I was at least going to try again in November. And so the racing chair I thought I was going to use that just for many circumstances just did not come through. And so it was January. I was given the okay to push, but I did not have a racing chair that hadn't been hit by a car to use. And so I did something that's kind of bold in a way. I reached out to Honda because after the Tokyo Games, it had been there was a chance that maybe I would be joining the Honda team. And so I reached out to them just because I'd had a contact. That whole situation also had kind of fallen through. But with my contact, I was like, Amanda McGrory is someone who, this doesn't happen often, but I have always ordered my racing chair off of her order form. We just so happen to be the same. And that's not normal. Racing chairs are very customized. But when I got to Illinois in 2011, I hopped into one of Amanda's old frames and it just worked so well. So I've always done that. And she happened to have a Honda frame at our training center that was going to be sent back to Japan. So I reached out to Honda asking if I could buy it at full price because they are very expensive chairs, but I was desperate and I just hoped that, it would be the right size for me. And if I were to order a new racing chair in January, that could take six months to get one. And I just did not really have that kind of time. And Honda just they deliberated, asked for a bio and got back to me and said, you know what, it just so happens that Amanda McGrory has just announced to us she's going to retire and is about to send us all of her equipment back to Japan. And we decided that instead of that, we would like her to send her equipment to you and we'll let you use it to decide if it is something you really want. And so it was just, that generosity, that willingness to take a risk on me because I had been hit by a car and I had no idea what would happen. And just the incredible coincidence that there was a racing chair frame that would fit me at our training center in Champaign. That is how I was able to start training again. And it ended up being a slightly different position than what Amanda used to take when I was in her chair. So it was a bit of a learning curve to get used to, but it has served me so well. And the Honda's increasingly supportive and incredible for all of my journey this year. So that's the story of that.
You have definitely learned that chair, I would say. When you said chairs are expensive, they're just shy of $40,000. I mean, I'm sure you get this for as much as I've gotten. I don't even drive that much in a week, but I've never spent that much on a car, let alone something I'm gonna race in. But also, if you're looking at your year in context, anybody that doesn't know that story, that freakish story of you being hit by a car on a training ride and how severe that was, breaking vertebrae in your back and really being thankful to be alive, just look at the progression of you as an athlete. You win gold in Tokyo, just shy of the world record. Next up, you smash 5 and 10K world records, and then you win your first ever world marathon major. It looks like a perfectly natural progression in this sport with a very serious detour in there. So I guess you're eternally optimistic, which is, I think I fell in love with you the first time I watched you race and get interviewed after the race. I mean, that optimism obviously helps because there's so much science behind it, but where does it come from? Where do you get that inspiration? Is it books, scripture, music, mentors, all of the above, none of the above?
Oh, glad you asked. It is a combination of all the above for sure, but at the very core is my faith that, my faith is that God is a God of love and that all things are, worthy of loving. And so in challenges, in setbacks, in attitudes that are not great, there's still the beauty and the worth of loving whatever comes at you, I guess, in a way. So I know that carries me through every challenge I've gone through. A good example is Chicago Marathon. Around mile 19 I was starting to get very, very fatigued. And, I was thinking the joy of the Lord is my strength. And so that joy is always there. It's unshakable. That's kind of what gets me through all hard things. Like when I can't sleep, for example, things like that, I can rely on something that is bigger and that love is always bigger than any sort of hardship that I've ever gone through. So I can look to that for hope, really.
Such a powerful emotion to draw upon. So to get that inspiration through divine love, I also remember reading, maybe it was during the pandemic, maybe it was a nutrition webinar you were giving from the University of Illinois. Maybe it was an article I was reading after you've won some race or smashed some record. But I remember being completely struck when you said, I'm not really competitive, or I'm one of the least competitive people I know. And I thought, how does she do what she does and go to the places you go, like being at mile 19 and having so much longer to go? How do you get to that spot and keep going without being competitive?
Yeah. So one thing that I have an answer for that over the years is something that touched me as a child. And so my dad actually passed away from brain cancer when I was 4 months old. And I grew up just knowing he had such a loving reputation by everyone, whoever knew him, just like never met a stranger kind of guy. And one thing my mom told me was that my dad would say, when things are the hardest is when you have to keep going. And what I've learned through a lot of challenges I've gone through in my life is that the process of going through something really hard, that process is the reward. Sometimes it's not going to be a first place, or it's not going to be maybe what you intended, but you always will learn things when you challenge yourself. And to me, that's what I think about. I'm like, okay, it's so hard right now. I need to try and be more efficient. I need to figure out what can keep my arms moving. And those skills will always translate somewhere else later on. Those experiences help me when I'm training. I can think back onto when I felt a certain way. I was like, okay, now I get to practice that. So maybe when I am at the next marathon, I'll be better. I realize there are lessons in the challenge. You have to keep going. You got to get those lessons.
Amazing. So right after our call, the process is the reward is going on my chalkboard. You heard it from Susannah Scaroni. The process is the reward. That's going to be everyone's next race mantra. And so speaking of processes, I'm going to return to this amazing feat. I think the New York Times headline was 3 marathons, 3 weeks, and 3 top 3 finishes. You were 3rd in Berlin, 2nd in London, 1 Chicago. New York is right around the corner. I would say that consistency has definitely been on your side this season. A couple of your greatest competitors have missed due to sicknesses. And so I think something that would be really beneficial to any of our listeners would be, there was actually a lot of people that did that. Meeting people in Berlin that were like, I'm heading over to London. I'll see you in Chicago. And I'm like, wow, they're on this 6-star journey, and it's so important to their striving to get this in. But I think what's extraordinary is that the level that you were doing these pushes, how did you, was it just airplane time, or how did you recover? You needed to recover from one effort and then reset to focus on the next race. So how did you focus and balance and compartmentalize the very demanding 3 weekends back to back to back?
That's a great question. And that was my first time ever doing 3 back-to-back races. So what I knew from experience was that I've done Boston and London back-to-back multiple times. And it's always challenging. And normally what gets me a little more optimistic about it is that most of us are also doing both of them. We're in the same boat. It wasn't that way with Chicago. I knew I was one of the few going there. I think the only woman who had done all 3. So what I try to do is focus on what I can control. And so I tried to really have, carbohydrate availability, regularly hydration. I've figured out ways throughout my life to improve the chances of sleeping well. And part of that really is, like you said, compartmentalizing things. So I'm the kind of person that if I'm not really productive, I get anxiety. I'm like, okay, I've got a million things to do. So I tried to be really organized about things, make sure I was getting things literally finished. And then I was reading Harry Potter, because to me, if I could get into some fantasy with Harry Potter or Lord of the Rings, I always bring those with me on trips because I can completely focus on that storyline. And I have a short-term memory, basically. So every time I read those books, something new, something I get. So I can really get mentally, relaxed from the stress of racing or grad school when I'm traveling by reading some fantasy. And that has helped me sleep well. So that was a big part of that trip, my nutrition, my sleep. Also, my husband was with me on these trips. And so honestly, I was even easier to kind of separate myself from racing because we were going on a journey together, and it was his first time overseas, in Europe at least. And he was also meeting athletes from all over the world who I've known forever, but that loved him. And it was so much fun.
So let's talk about Jacob. Let's talk about that. You guys got married in September, right before this whirlwind fall marathon season. I want to ask first, were you kind of a bridezilla since you like to focus on the things you can control, or were you a very pleasant bride? Or should I ask Jacob? Should I ask Jacob that?
I wish Jacob was here for you to ask him that. I would say that I was pretty easygoing, but I had an Excel sheet that had like a million tabs so that everything that I could possibly fathom that we needed to have done was on a list somewhere. And so it was all accounted for, and that gave me a lot of peace of mind. And then I'm very easygoing. So as long as we had the things we probably needed to do at least checked off, I was pretty happy.
So the Excel spreadsheet was done, and then you could enjoy yourself as the
I got
bride.
that done in April. So.
Oh my gosh, you're such a great planner. So this was a very unconventional but very lucrative honeymoon that you went on after that, going to Berlin and London. How did you balance making that, I guess, a vacation, but also business at the same time? You know, we always kind of, when we're filling out information, it's like, is this business or pleasure? And you're like, well, I kind of like my job, and we did do some pleasurable things. So it's both. How did you do that?
It is. And so the way we managed that was, Jacob is wonderful, and he knows me so well, obviously. He knows that this is not only a job, but a big goal of mine was to perform well. He knows that I'm the kind of person who needs to be structured in a way that I don't get anxious about things. And so honestly, he brought his Kindle, and I brought my Harry Potter book. We did a lot of reading.
You didn't read him. You didn't read him Harry Potter out loud.
I offered to.
Okay.
I offered to.
So he could get wrapped up in that fantasy with you.
Exactly. We worked on our own communication skills by telling each other what we'd read about. We did do some sightseeing though, and I try, as you know, we don't want to get overconsumed in the cool places we're going, because it can become tiring, or you can miss your train and then you're just really hangry or whatever. But we did get some sightseeing done at each city we were in. And that was super fun. As I'm a marathoner, I'm really bad at traveling. I don't know how to do things because I focus on staying at the hotel and getting ready for the race, but he's awesome at researching things to do and find things close by. So he kind of took the reins on what we were going to do, and we did them together. It was fun for me because there's things I hadn't done before in those cities I've been in, and we got to do them together. So we balanced it really nicely.
Yeah, I think it's really special in a sport that's demanding a lot travel-wise, that when we are with family, we tend to do things that are a little more rewarding. How many countries have we been to, and we only saw race courses, and so it is special when we could share it with loved ones. Another gentleman in your life who has been so influential is your coach, Adam. He is so incredible, not just in developing the wheelchair athletes at the University of Illinois, but really, I think what I adore about him is the same thing I adored in my first professional coach, Joe Vigil. They just preach lifestyle. This is the program that works, and the rest is up to you. You have to live your life in a way, and you have done that so beautifully. So talk a little bit about Coach Adam and really what he's done. He has alone built the stories that are making your sport worthy of all this attention. And so tell us a little bit about him.
I am so glad you said that. It honestly, now that I've been in grad school, I've realized now why one of the cornerstones of Adam's brilliance, and that is that he teaches you how to learn something yourself. And so to really learn something, you have to try it out and experience it yourself. So as you noted, he provides this perfect framework that will work for people of different developmental levels. But within each session, there are so many skills that you have to sort of actually intentionally grasp onto. You start to see those more and more the more races you experience. And I think it's his brilliance in giving us environments that are full of all of these lessons, but not telling us each thing we are doing. It's showing it to us so that we have the option to make the most of it, or we have the option to go through the motions and maybe not make the most of it. I think I've realized he's not telling us the answers. He's giving us all the information and allowing us to put it together.
It's similar to that analogy. Like if you want to help somebody, you don't give them fish, you give them a fishing rod and teach them how to fish. And so he's
absolutely
just great in allowing that journey to be very personal to each one of his athletes. And he does not look or act or seem old enough to have developed the caliber of athletes he has developed in so many years. Has there been athletes before you that have that you've looked up to that kind of paved the way to see that you could strive in the same sport?
Absolutely. I would not be here today were it not for so many people. And many of those people were athletes before me, athletes who currently train with me, athletes who compete against me, who don't even train with me. You know, when I entered Illinois in 2011, I was so wonderfully welcomed in by so many athletes who I'd admired. Amanda McGrory, Tatiana McFadden, Erin Pike, Jessica Galley. These are some Paralympians who did the best thing ever. They just welcomed me. And so I felt like training was fun here as a group. And without even knowing that what I was doing, I was learning from them. So I was becoming more efficient in my stroke. I was learning how to draft. I was getting faster because they were all much faster than me. And we were doing it in a positive way. So I would, I'd be remiss if I ever thought I would be where I am today without the influence that they've all had in such a great way. And I have to say, to really point out Amanda, because not only on the race course is her technique is so perfect and beautiful, but her professionalism is, it's inspiring. She has the attitude to just really say what needs to be said in a manner that needs to be heard. And, she's done so much along with Adam to point out, areas that are flaws within the disability movement and really make stands and movements for equality and for the rights of people with disabilities. So I've been really inspired by that in addition to my athletic skills.
Yeah. And Coach Adam Bleakney obviously just nurtures that kind of atmosphere. It's the standard that he sets, that this is just a cycle of inspiration for all of you, but the women in particular. When I look at Amanda McGrory and all of her accolades and major marathon wins and Paralympic gold, but now she works, I think, for the USOC in their archives division.
Exactly.
And then Tatiana McFadden, I think she has 7 Paralympic golds and over 20 world marathon major wins. I mean, these are big roles, right? These are women who have done it at the highest level. And so I'm just going to return to where you are right now in this sport, because this is now you. You are this generation that has really seen so much rise because of them, just so much rise in the sport, getting the world marathon majors on board for equal pay, having Abbott world marathon majors. Abbott in themselves has been such great advocates for the wheelchair division, even giving you some incentives during the race to earn some extra points. So there's and then Amanda working television, now having a seat at the table in New York. It's going to be Kurt Fernley from Australia, who's going to be in the booth working for ESPN. So I think this is just going to get better. Where do you see it going from here? Like how do you see the sport evolving from where it is? Is it from a technology standpoint and the chairs that you're riding? Is it more awareness? Is it more programs like the University of Illinois now seeing like how big this can be, that training groups start to happen all over the country? Like, tell me what's in your head.
Okay. I'm so glad that you asked.
I'm so fired up.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Me too. Well, what I believe needs to happen, and I think this is a necessary part of that, is having, like you said, more programs. So more opportunities for people with disabilities to learn that they can be active, and that sports can be an avenue for that. And so from there, we then increase the depth and the strength of our fields at the elite level. But what I really hope that will happen is that more programs will begin to pop up everywhere. Not every kid needs to come to the University of Illinois only to get access to a training group. And I think it's already starting to happen. There's a training group at the University of Arizona now again. And so I think we need more collegiate level. We need coaches at high schools to be trained in how to coach wheelchair racing, because there are going to be kids with disabilities that want to be athletes. And so having that proper training right away will be awesome. I think additionally, what you are seeing now is we do have technological advances kind of just like exploding. But I'm also, to be very honest, I know I push in a Honda chair. I am an advocate that we need to have accessible equipment for people. As wheelchair racing is growing, it's natural that the technology has developed, which is awesome. However, we really have to focus on access in this sport, because it's a technology that's required to do the sport. It's not necessarily, in my opinion, it's not necessarily like Formula One or cycling where it's like, yeah, I'm going to do that. But people who are going to be wheelchair racers already require equipment to use. So we need to make sure that that's accessible. And so I think as things progress, we're also going to see movements that push for more accessibility in the technology, which will then hopefully happen based on technological requirements. So just better standardization of the technology available for athletes, kind of like what cycling does. Cycling is very standardized in bikes and how they're built. And I think you'll see that in wheelchair racing, so that there is more clarity for manufacturers. And also part of that will hopefully be cost, and so that it's not cost prohibitive.
And it's actually a really good, since you brought up cycling, it's actually a really good avenue that some of these manufacturers could really have sponsorship programs that are really high profile. Like when you're on the stage and not just the million people on the sidelines watching you go by every given weekend, but also the television time that is now so robust, not just in the visual of you competing, but also now in the knowledge, thanks to having these expert analysts in the booth. So it's also, I don't know why it surprises me that the technology in shoes for the runners and the wheelchair athletes is going at the same time. Like the technology is really advancing at the same time. And I'm talking accessibility, but one is $250 and the other is close to $40,000. So there's a difference there. But I really feel like it's interesting that the technology is the conversation in both races going on. So we've already talked about the people that have inspired you and your great coaches. Do you see, I was amazed at the New York City start list in the wheelchair division, how many young athletes are on the starting line. And the New York Roadrunners are fantastic advocates for the wheelchair division. But it was so impressive to me to see so many young athletes on there. Are there any rising stars that you mentor specifically, or that you kind of have your eye on because their form impresses you or something about them stands out?
Yes, absolutely. I'm glad. I mean, that gave me chills to think about, because, that was me when I learned about wheelchair racing as a fourth grader. You have to learn about it. And these programs like New York Roadrunner starting in New York, like a kids adaptive sports wheelchair racing program, is just the perfect marriage of showing young kids with disabilities what sports are out there and how to be active. But yes, so I honestly believe Hannah Diedrich, she's an athlete who trains with me, she has great form and tons of speed on it. So she is one of those athletes I'm looking at.
Was she at the New York Mini?
She was.
Yeah.
Yes, she was there.
Yeah. Okay. I remember watching her.
I would definitely keep your eyes on her. Honestly, there are so many. And out of the program that I grew up in Spokane, Washington, I know there are a lot of really skilled high school athletes over there too. And I'm biased, but I know they're going to be good. And they're very well cared for. But it is exciting. There are so many up and rising wheelchair racers, and I am just the most honored ever to get to be one of the people that they look up to. Like I look up to many others.
Right. And I think a really good lesson for any of these young wheelchair athletes is learning of your race in Tokyo. And this isn't the first time or the only time, but I remember reading very soon after that race that your speedometer broke. And that could be like a crisis moment, right? In a race that's about pacing and consistency, and as much as it is about being competitive on that stage, on the Paralympic stage. But your speedometer was broken. You were kind of like you took the lead and were pushing, and were kind of surprised that no one was going with you. I mean, surprised by your own strength. That is amazing. And do you think that not having the speedometer allowed you to kind of open up and feel where you were as opposed to govern where you were?
I do. I think that's a really good point to take out of that race. I was pushing just naturally. What I felt was a smooth pace I should go for my pole. And as most of it, I'm shocked to this day that they weren't with me. I wasn't sprinting, but the way the race transpired, when I finally got over the shock, it was so heartwarming that, what my best effort was that day got to be the best. Even if it was unconventional and something I didn't plan to do, it was exactly that. It was my real strength, which I doubted would be an option as a strategy, ended up being okay. And so sometimes really just relying on what your strengths are can end up with a gold medal.
Yeah. And just shy of the world record. I mean, it was an extraordinary performance. And I thought if her speedometer was working, it might not have worked out that way. She might have stayed within this box that she was comfortable in, which is why I think sometimes we have too much information. But maybe our devices go bad at the right time because we're ready for something better. So I just thought it would be a great lesson for some of the younger wheelchair athletes to see that it doesn't all have to go perfectly to have a good day. Things can go wrong. And if we stay optimistic, which I think is one of your best traits, if we could stay optimistic that we can come out on the other end much brighter than we ever could have imagined. I think a big part of, aside from your optimism, that allows you to stay on top is your education. You're a registered dietitian. You have your doctorate.
I'm about to graduate with my master's.
Okay, master's.
But it's been a 5-year master's program.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much food out there. You got to study it all.
Exactly.
So I think when you travel so much, it's so hard to make the right choices. Do you have some go-tos when you travel to make sure you're fueling properly, since that is really what the game is all about, is having the right amount of fuel to go the distance? What are your go-tos when you travel?
Yep, that's awesome. So if I'm traveling, the easy way for me to break it down is I need a good source of protein and colorful things. So then you'll have some fat attached to whatever you're having most likely, and you'll get other macronutrients. So protein is one that's a little harder to maybe get when you're traveling, especially if you're flying. So I like to bring protein bars, just like a Kirkland's protein bar, or I do love hard-boiled eggs. I wouldn't recommend bringing that on an airplane, just for the sake of everybody else. Or I've brought bags of tuna fish with me too, to have in my hotel room. Again, don't open that on the plane.
I was just going to say, on the flight back from Chicago, someone ate a tuna fish sandwich next to me, and it's just not cool. They shouldn't even sell them in the airports.
Oh my gosh.
So tuna and eggs, great protein sources, but not airplane food. Yeah.
Yes. And then I try to find colorful things. So fruits and vegetables are, normally fairly accessible to find. And then they are going to be, for me, that's what's going to feel good no matter what. And then when I'm eating and I have the opportunity to eat at a restaurant or go to a grocery store, I again just try to have high quality protein and carbohydrates. And then that's what I focus on in my meal. And a lot of different foods will meet those requirements.
It seems so simple and responsible of you to say. It's just easy. It's so easy, right? You don't need a calculator or a scale. It's just colorful and whole foods.
Yep.
And so now that you are home, it's kind of rare these days for you to enjoy some home time. But what's your favorite thing? Do you like to cook?
I do like to cook. I like to cook and I like to read and I like to go on walks. Those are my 3 hobbies.
And this is the best season to do it in, when the mornings are a little cooler. Yeah.
Yes. And where we live in Champaign, Urbana, there's a ton of maple trees. And so the colors are insane right now. So that's been really fun. My husband also likes to cook, and what he likes to do in cooking is he likes chopping, which is the one thing I hate doing. So we've been cooking together this week. We made chicken stir fry together last night, and he chops the vegetables, and I kind of told him when he can put each one in, because that's the part that he doesn't quite know.
Your match. You have totally met your match. Wow. Soulmate in Jacob.
Yes, exactly. And he loves colorful food too. So we just experiment with different fruits and vegetables and make a lot of soups, stir fries, and smoothies. I love to make smoothies as well.
Yes. I would say my daughter's friends love to come to our house because they say I make really good smoothies, and they don't know they're drinking a bunch of kale and spinach in there, but they're getting their greens in whether they like it or not.
That's awesome.
So I know you like Harry Potter and Lord of the Rings. Are you reading something right now that's not that, I guess, specific to staying calm and relaxed during travel?
Oh, well, that is a good question. So yesterday I actually finished book 7 of Harry Potter because I had brought it with me. And so I just had to just finish it. But right now, I will be honest with you, now that I'm not traveling, I have shifted my focus back to my thesis. So just working on data analysis now on the last chapter of my thesis and getting ready to present that to my committee is my main focus.
Wow. You are so disciplined, whether you're traveling or home training, so very disciplined. We're going to wrap up a little bit. There's a conversation we had 3 years ago now in Tokyo. We were having lunch or breakfast or something. And you said that you loved swimming. Do you still swim quite a bit?
I do love swimming. I have not swam since the accident last year. They gave me the green light to wade in the pool. I wasn't supposed to be horizontal, but I have not done much swimming this year, and it is still my favorite modality of training. So.
I know. And describe why you love swimming, because my jaw was on the table to hear you, because I hate swimming. I don't hate a lot of things in life. Swimming is torture to me. Like my skin itches because it's so sensitive to the chlorine in the ocean. It's never warm enough. So swimming's not my thing. And when you described it, I felt like I was in some fantasy novel, hearing you describe how beautiful swimming is in your life. And so I would love for you to describe that to listeners.
I love that. Swimming is one of the only ways I've been able to really feel like I was just free. My body is floating, my body is happy, my legs are finally just happy because, whether they're fighting gravity by sitting in my daily wheelchair or they're being scrunched together inside my racing chair, they have kind of a hard life until I'm in the pool. And when I get out of the pool, my legs are the color of the rest of my upper body, which just shows how much better blood flow they're getting. So it's really a whole body experience that even my lower body, where I have a complete spinal cord injury, is benefiting from more blood flow. If I have goggles on, which I always try to have goggles on, I'm even happier because I just feel so free at that point. I can go under, I can have all of this opening up of my arms, which our shoulders as wheelchair users are really overused. And so to go into a pool and be able to open up without any kind of impact on my joints feels so amazing. And I also love exercising, which is no surprise to anybody, but swimming feels like such a good way to get my heart rate up. And I like to swim for a mile, and it takes a lot of mental fortitude to do that. But it's again, that process is something challenging. It's so rewarding to me to get through that. And I learn how to get through it. I don't get there. I'm okay, phew, I did it. It's I learned how to do it today. So that's what I get out of swimming.
Once again, you just make swimming seem so poetic. And then when we got back from Tokyo, I got in the pool and I'm yeah, it's just not working. It's not feeling like poetry for me. But it's amazing. It's, I just
keep trying.
I know, but that conversation really stuck with me. You just made something that was so uncomfortable for me seem so peaceful and fluid and forgiving. And it was just fascinating. Even my daughter talks about it. And she was only 7 or 8 at the time. So let's look forward to New York, because that's coming up next. And then we'll be wrapped up for the episode 2 of Marathon Talk. Kurt Fearnley, the 3-time Paralympic gold medalist from Australia, is going to be in the commentators booth for ESPN, which is super exciting. I already said that earlier, but you also have pretty stiff competition. You have the defending champion, Madison De Rosario, and the woman you're trying to beat to the Abbott World Marathon Major Series 14, I believe it is, Manuela Schär. What's it going to take to win?
It is going to take a good night's sleep, at least, leading up to it. Some good night's sleeps, more good nights than none, but also a good amount of carbohydrates, I think, during the race. Fortunately, New York's a hilly course. So in Chicago, because it's flat, and I was trying to go as fast as I could, and I was trying to get the course record, I didn't take the chance to drink anything. And normally I drink from my carbohydrate fluid on a downhill. And so I will plan on doing that, try not to hit the same wall I hit in Chicago. But it's also going to take different kind of biomechanics than we've been doing with these flatter courses. So climbing is a very different biomechanic than a flat. And so I'll start really gearing into that. We're doing hill climbs tomorrow. And part of that, being good at, in 3 weeks from now, is thinking of those hills tomorrow and trying to think what is fastest and most efficient for me, and doing some visualization while I'm training so that I can be more prepared. And experience has taught me that. So to listeners, like sometimes it takes a few New Yorks or a few marathons to realize what you need to train for and how to think when you're training. It'll take that. It'll take, a miracle of not getting a flat tire, which is what I also pray for. My equipment making it, my equipment coming unscathed. Those are all things I don't take for granted whenever they come and they're good. And it's going to take, honestly, New York as a hilly course normally separates the group. So Berlin, I was not surprised to have a group of us working together. I was kind of surprised in London that Catherine de Brunner was able to create a gap and hold on to it. That doesn't normally happen in London. I wasn't as surprised in Chicago, but I think New York, you could see some time trial races going on. So it's really trying to be strong, but also be efficient enough to not die at the second half of the course, because New York's hard every moment of it. So it's kind of conserving.
Yeah, and even the streets themselves are challenging in New York City, right? Exactly. It's like it's not smooth. There's cambers. It's hard to navigate turns. It's really hard coming off the is it the Queensboro Bridge at mile 13? There's 16. Hay bales. For your safety, there are hay bales because the turn is so sharp. There's also that Abbott sprint incentive for those 8 extra points in the series total. That's at 20K in New York. And it's after a good flat stretch through Brooklyn. I was going to ask if that's important to you, because I don't even think you need that in order to win the series.
It was important to me in Chicago. Yes. Before Chicago, I was the candidate that needed those bonus points. And miraculously, I got them in Chicago, despite the fact that I was really fatigued at that point. So I think those points, when it's a 400 meter strip, I think it's a little bit better in terms of incentivizing bonus points than just getting to a mile marker. What seems to happen is that a lot of times the person that comes in first also is at whatever mile marker first. And so I think having a 400 meter strip does give some different athletes a chance to get the bonus points. You saw Aaron Pike, I think, got the men's bonus point, which is so cool, and he needed those. I will be trying for them as well. As you said, I'm not going to take anything for granted. I need to be able to finish New York to have a good chance at the points, but I always try to do whatever I can, wherever I can. So I will try to get the points just because it's who I am.
Let's just be greedy and win, and not just win, but win by a lot is what Susannah is saying. She doesn't want to just win the race. She wants to win the series by a lot. That's fantastic. So consistency has really been to your advantage this year in the series total. Would you ever have imagined last fall when you were recovering that this is the year that unfolded in front of you?
No, not at all, to be very honest. I think the biggest hard part last year was the curiosity of wondering how I would have fared, just knowing how strong I felt in Tokyo. But I absolutely would not have anticipated, okay, well, next year's the year I will go. So I'm shocked and thankful.
Well, a stroke of encouragement too. You talked about visualization from now until New York. And it's so important because when you visualize, your internal body, your cells and your DNA get to work to live that out, to make that a possibility. So visualization is so critical to evolving into the athlete we want to become. So glad you're visualizing between now in New York City. Susannah Scaroni, thank you so much for your time today. I am so grateful that you are my first guest, and I want to wish you the very best of luck in New York City. We will be cheering so loudly.
Thank you so much. It was a very huge pleasure and honor to be here with you today, Deena.
Thank you. We'll see you soon in the Big Apple.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
In each show, we'll be featuring an Abbott World Marathon Majors 6 questions with a 6-star finisher. We'll be sharing with our 6-star finishers a regular opportunity to feature on the show. And so today, our 6-star finisher is Karen Sweeting from Leighton Buzzard in the UK. Now, Karen got her Abbott World Marathon Major 6-star finish in 2019. She ran her first marathon in London in 2002, where she just had a diagnosis of breast cancer. She goes on to say, "It was one of the happiest days of my life running in London that year." For the question, what's your favourite iconic landmark on a majors course and why? Karen says running into Central Park in New York, fantastic support and views. One thing you'd wish you'd known about any major before you ran it, Karen says, how boring the Boston route is. Karen, she does say sorry afterwards. Boston, boring? Karen. Which course gave you the most support and why? London, says Karen, home territory, saw all my family more than once. And then which course was the fastest for you? And what was your time? New York, she says, in 4:12:21. Well done, Karen. You are this show's Abbott World Marathon Major 6-star finisher.
We're almost there for this show. Looking forward to New York City Marathon. It's up next on the Abbott World Marathon Major Tour, November 6th, and it's the culmination of Series 14 of the Abbott World Marathon Majors. A first from New York Roadrunners this year, non-binary runners will earn prize money. We've seen non-binary categories in London and Chicago, but for the first time at the TCS New York City Marathon or any Abbott World Marathon Majors race, prize money will be awarded to places 1st through 5th.
It's going to be a great men's race as well at the elite end. Boston 2022 champ Evans Chebet can tie Eliud Kipchoge at the top of the series men's standings, but he's got to win. And now if he does, it actually forces, and I didn't know this, Deena, but it forces a race director vote to decide the series champion. I mean, I didn't know that. So all the race directors vote if the standings are tied at the end of the year.
Right. And aren't you just going to figure that the guy who broke the world record in his race is going to be the one that it leads to? We shouldn't assume. I know.
Yeah. So
we're here to report news.
Evans Chebet. So if he wins, he can tie Eliud Kipchoge at the top of the Abbott World Marathon Majors series standings, but he's got to win it. And if he does, then it's over to the World Marathon Majors race directors to vote on the series champion. He is the fastest man in the field, though. He's run 2:03:00, Chebet. He's not going to have it all his own way, though. Shuro Kitata of Ethiopia, who has won London and been second in New York City before, is also in the field. So he knows how to run New York. And, you know, New York is a course that if you have experience of running it, then you know how to run it. So yeah, it should be an exciting race. There's some news about the elite women's field, though.
Yes, and Paris Jepchirchir, the Olympic champion and reigning champion in New York, is out. She was battling some injury, which really makes a clear path for this year's World Marathon champion and leader in the Abbott World Marathon Major Series, Gautam Ghebreselassie. And she's such a strength-based runner, which, as you alluded to, New York definitely demands, like that cross-country grit applied to the marathon distance. But on the American side, I have to be excited for Boston Marathon champion Des Linden, as well as the entire U.S. World Championships team that included Sarah Hall, Keira D'Amato, and Emma Bates will also be towing the line. So exciting time. And I have to mention Edna Kiplagat, the 42-year-old timeless marathoner. She's won Boston. She's won London. She's won New York City. And age is just a number to Edna. She is a threat every time she steps on that starting line. And in the men's wheelchair division, Marcel Hug has the series wrapped up. But can Daniel Romanchuk, who is coming second to him time and time again, weekend after weekend, could this be Daniel's weekend to shine? And so it's an exciting time. Aaron Pike, also another one to watch. He just got the win in Cape Town, which was it a prospect for adding to the World Marathon Majors? So it's a really hilly course. Aaron won. He's a good strength-based runner, so New York might be his time to shine.
You did mention Des Linden, Sarah Hall, Kira D'Amato, Emma Bates. I wondered just how much they took from Emily Sisson's run, because like when my wife Liz was running at that level, and you, of course, Deena, you see other women that you're racing with at championships and on start lines, and you think, wow, okay, that's a run. And sometimes it can ramp up your own run, can't it? Particularly if you're all from the same country and you're all towing the line. They must have taken something from Emily Sisson's run.
Absolutely. I'm sure they're not the only ones that were inspired by Emily Sisson's American record in Chicago, similar to Benson Kipruto, the men's champion in Chicago, being inspired by his teammate Amos Kipruto the weekend before. This is marathoning at its best when we can just see the inspiration circle. I'm willing to bet that Kira D'Amato is going to run a fast spring marathon to try to get that record back.
Deena's put it out there. You heard it here. Hey, Susannah, of course, show favourite, as she's our interview this week. But Susannah Scaroni is racing New York again. She's favourite to win the women's title. And only if she scores nothing, and Manuela Carr scores 25 for the win and 8 bonus points for the intermediate sprint, can Shah deny her. So I don't like to badge it up just yet, but she's going to take some beating.
Yeah. I mean, these races, this is the end of the season. This is going to be a hotly contested race. They're in it for so much money. And Abbott has been a huge advocate for the wheelchair races. And so it is equal prize money, $50,000 to win the series. That's a serious amount of cash that they're going to be racing for on top of the prize money alone in New York City.
I've only been to the New York City Marathon once, and I think it was in 2005. When Liz was the pacemaker. So she went out and pacemaked the first half of New York City in 2005. And I can't remember what she had to go through in, maybe 72, something like that, 71, 72. And we ended up going back to the finish really late because we were also supporting an incredible girl called Claire, who had meningitis as a young girl. And then she went back and she did New York. And I can't remember off the top of my head, but it took her something like 10 hours to finish on, it was an incredible effort from her. So New York is a real spectacle in marathon terms. It attracts more than 50,000 runners and takes 12,000 volunteers. Over 2.5 million spectators line the course. The course goes through the city's 5 boroughs: Staten Island, Brooklyn, Queens, the Bronx, and Manhattan. It then starts in Staten Island, ends in Central Park. 127 runners did the first New York City Marathon in 1970. Only 55 finished. And only one of those 127 was a woman, and she didn't complete the race. I didn't know this. The course's highest elevation point is the Verrazano Narrow Bridge. It's only 3/4 of a mile into the race. So you're getting kicked in the face after not even a mile with the highest part. And you'll be there again. You're packing up your suitcase again, Deena. You'll be in New York City.
Yeah, working for ESPN, I'll be on the women's lead vehicle, which is the best seat in the house these days, right? To be on that women's lead vehicle to see all these amazing performances. But New York is such an amazing race. And I actually love breaking it down in my head. It's like a mental thing, because 42 kilometers or 26.2 miles seems like such a daunting thing that I started thinking that marathons are really only 8 water bottles long. But New York makes it easier because it's only 5 boroughs and you knock off the first one within the first couple of miles. So 5 boroughs is, for me, a much more easy to digest a number than the intimidation of the marathon distance. So there's a little tactic for those of you tackling New York City.
Top tip there from Deena, just break it up into boroughs, work through one borough and you're straight into the next. Anything else happening for you, Deena, before we wrap up the show? Anything exciting going on?
I'm just excited to wrap up marathon season. It has been a whirlwind, and it's been so fun to be a part of it with you, Martin, to be able to look in and visit with these athletes and see these amazing performances and get the inspiration out of these performances so we can share them with listeners.
Yeah, great. Right. That's all for episode 2 of Marathon Talk, powered by Abbott World Marathon Majors. Enjoy the run, wherever it takes you.